Okay, yeah. Mind Karen.
Is there any way of determining how many times he's been chairman?
Yeah, we have that.
Would you have that information? Yeah. You guys afraid we're going to take up the collection or something? You're open. Too late. You're with her. You're with her.
That's what has to be a collection.
Did you see the agenda this morning?
December 5th.
December 5th? Yeah. Yeah, I heard that. I was gonna leave and I saw she get up there. Yes. Okay.
That's why we wanted to.
I wonder how many state fairs.
We need background music.
I can get some on my computer, but I don't know that you'd like it.
Got a beat to it, I'll listen.
Dean goes, "Why are you listening to Audio Slave?" I said, "Because I can." I think because they like something, but I can't.
Britt locking the doors so no one else can get in.
A public venue.
Last time, though, we should have shuttled them in through the back.
Actually, Kristen did put a note out there on the doors.
Dan can see that. Put Eric Coyne or a body out there saying,
Yes.
"Oh, that's good."
It's a smaller crowd this afternoon. Okay, I think the board is back in session at this time, and this time we're taking up our 1:30 item, which is receive revised administrative draft, general plan, goals, and policies report. Good morning, Teresa. Evening or afternoon, Teresa.
Afternoon.
Yeah.
Mr. Wordley and supervisors. You have in front of you a revised goals and policies report for the general plan, and there are several requests that we have for you today. The first is to provide policy guidance on the 3 sections of the policy document that you have not yet reviewed: the water resources, scenic landscapes, and area plans sections, to select a public hearing alternative from the 2 alternatives that are posted to you in the staff report, and to authorize staff to move forward with public review of the document and to set public hearings to complete the General Plan 2030 update process. And the other request that we have is to approve the substitution of ESA Associates for URS Corporation in the agreement with Mintier and Associates. We have sent a draft letter to the consultant indicating that we would be seeking your support for that today. After the 3 years that we've been working on this process have lapsed, at the time when a schedule needed to be solidified, URS, who is indicated in the scope of services as having, as performing the EIR work for us, was unable to reach an agreement with Mintier and Associates, but an alternative consultant has been proposed to us. ESA is a large, broad-based professional planning and environmental firm based in Sacramento. They do have staff available, as they just finished another county's EIR, and so that team is available to immediately start work with your approval on our general plan EIR.
Chairman, could I ask for, Teresa, I'm reading from the document here, the change in EIR consultant. So Mentor and Associates and URS Corporation, that's been the team that we've been working with, is that correct?
That is correct. URS did prepare the background report document, but not the modifications to the background report document.
Then we come back, and so the recommendation is to keep Mentor and Associates, but add another replacement for URS. Am I reading it correctly?
That's right. They're sub-consultants to Mintier and Associates, so it's replacing a sub.
We're talking about a sub-consultant.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be sure.
And you're just giving us that information, and that's already been accomplished, right?
They are aware that we were going to be seeking from you your approval today.
On advice of council, you need your approval.
Okay. All right. Is there any further questions, discussions about that? Will you entertain a motion?
I would move for approval.
Second? Okay. Further discussion? If not, please cast your votes. A little slower after lunch. So
I was going through that in my head to make sure we weren't doing this with that motion.
okay.
So to step back to the previous requests of your board, we are asking you to select a alternative from the 2 alternative schedules that are provided. Both of these have modified technical advisory committee and agency outreach process as part of them. What we would do is identify every agency who has some role in implementation or who the policies in the document would be relevant to and circulate the document to them, seeking written responses rather than facilitating verbal responses from them. And so that would save us some time through to adoption. The other way that we see that we could save some time through to adoption is to Either is to combine the Planning Commission public hearings and the Board of Supervisors public hearings. So the two options that you're looking at, the first has separate public hearings for Planning Commission and Board, and the second has combined public hearings for Planning Commission and Board, resulting in approximately a one-month time savings.
We are required to get written recommendations from the Planning Commission on the general plan, so we'd have to coordinate the technicalities to accomplish that last option.
And the other potentially time-consuming phase is the Planning Commission has to consider separately any changes the Board of Supervisors makes in the plan that had not been previously considered.
Right, and that requires referral back to the Planning Commission, and then they have up to 45 days to respond, but it's an up to 45 days to respond. So again, we'd have to coordinate the timing very closely.
That's why we've provided two joint hearings.
It would seem like that latter one would be to our advantage again having a joint meeting, because if there's no editorializing going on, I mean, we would be there together. If there was new direction or different direction given by the board, the Planning Commission would be a part of that process in a sense.
That does save some time, because we wouldn't have to write up special reports to the Planning Commission explaining what you did, so they would be able to see it.
What's the pleasure of our?
Well, I just have a quick question, if I could, Mr.
Absolutely.
Chairman. And it is after lunch, so forgive me, but they both, according to the time frame, I understand the joint hearing if that's ideal, but it's still saying March 2007, so it's the same projected ending, it's just...
What you're looking at is the preparation of the implementation report, but if you look at the adoption months are different. The first is March 07 and the second February 07.
The implementation report's still in March, but the adoption dates are up a month on the second alternative.
Okay, well, you fooled me by putting the same item last that said implementation report, and I'm like, okay, I am blonde, but I don't get this.
Well, that was one thing. I mean, you could look at doing those simultaneously. That's what you're saying. The adoption and the implementation report being done simultaneously. Is that what you're saying in option?
It could be done.
Well, what would be the reason for having it done separately?
Less argument.
And that's how it's traditionally done, basically.
It's usually you
Right.
wait to see what happens with the general plan date, and then bring back an implement.
Sort of like a tentative decision type thing, and then make final change. All right.
On this TAC process, the outreach process, so instead of having our meetings like we've had in the past with each individual group, like agriculture and resource, whatever, they would be submitting written input.
We could still hold an agricultural advisory committee meeting, so in the ordinary course of county business. But for the other groups, not only the TAC members, but also we had the subtask groups with the invited specialists, would also target them and ask them to provide us with written feedback.
I don't think that's, I mean, I think that's a good way to go, because we're talking about a written document, we're responding to that written document, and to do it in a written format, to me, makes a lot of sense, because it causes you to focus your attention and respond appropriately. Otherwise, you could say, have general kind of conversations, then I just think that's a good way to go. I don't see a problem with that. Anybody else have? They've already had public opportunities to speak their mind. They can still speak their mind through written comments, and then it'll be more on point, I think. And if it's a situation where it just becomes something to be adopted in, that you can take that and paste it in, and away you go. Do you have a problem with that?
I don't have a problem with it. The only thing I'm thinking of in the Ag Committee is you're going to get a proposal for buffer zones.
Yes, and
But that could be covered just as well in writing when we get back to it at a later date, too.
at this point, all we have in the general plan update is a commitment to consider the issue, to study the issue. That can come back later on.
Okay, so what's our pleasure? We're given a couple of options here.
Well, do we choose between option 1 and 2? Is that,
That's what we are, unless you want to make some other
Let me,
hybrid of it. Split the baby some other way.
thought we could do half and half. But what, I'm curious as to staff's recommendation. You've given us two choices. We're all anxious to see this completed and to go smoothly. I have an opinion, I think, too, but you can disagree if you'd like. But you're giving us two options. I'd just be curious, Mr. Chairman, as to what staff's recommendation is, what is best for them to follow.
Well, yeah, I think either option is okay with staff. We have no real preference. I think we were asked to look at alternatives that would move it along quicker than the first option, and that's why we put together the second option. But we're comfortable with either option.
And of course, you know, if something comes up during the first combined hearing that indicates to the board that you should separate the public hearings, you've always got that option of doing that too, later on. So you can always modify this. This is just sort of a planning procedure.
I guess my concern about one is that I see the potential, the Planning Commission could meet, they could decide, we need more time, we need to re-meet. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that could happen. And then, and so you have the potential for multiple meetings of the Planning Commission before it gets to the Board of Supervisors. And then we may decide we need multiple meetings. And I'd rather us sort of meet together and try to reduce the numbers of meetings that otherwise could come out of that. I just have a concern that it would be easier, not anybody's intentions, but I mean, it could easily turn into more meetings than just the one meeting for the Planning Commission and the one meeting for the Board of Supervisors.
I think it also goes without saying that both options before you, those are the best case scenarios.
Sure, sure.
There's
Well, we're
always
trying to minimize
chance that
risk
something
here.
could-
I think this takes away some of the risk of the multiple meetings. When two separate bodies acting independently of each other have meetings, then you have the potential for a multiplication process, I think.
I prefer option 2 with the joint meetings.
Yeah.
There's at least 3 votes there, so item 2 or option 2, and proceed with that.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying, cast your votes. Unanimous decision to go that way. Thank you very much, staff, for bringing that to us, and thank you for thinking outside the box to come up with some alternatives to move this along. Get her done. Even though you're not going to get her done during my term as chairman, but we're going to get her done.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Since we are talking about getting it done, November 7th, the election, Proposition 90, how will that impact our general plan?
Well, it depends on what happens, I guess. There are two, we haven't really sat down yet with county council, but from what I know of the measure, there's two options, and probably would be a combination of both. One, you're still allowed to adopt regulations in the interest of public health and safety. And you are allowed to amend existing regulations. Well, you do have an existing general plan. This is all it is really an amendment to the existing general plan. So two approaches are possible.
Thank you.
But ultimately, the courts will have to tell us.
Well, I was going to say, who knows if it passes, because there's a tremendous amount of speculation as to what everything means.
I just wanted to get George on the record, okay?
Okay. So we ready to move on?
Moving on to item number 3, which would be to review the new sections, the 3 new elements.
Where do you want to begin?
I don't know which one's first.
What are the numbers?
I think water is the most interesting one. That is.
All right. Let's go there.
Is that?
It's chapter 11.
How do I find that in here?
It's only really it's interesting from the standpoint that while the existing general plan had policies and programs regarding water, this is the first time they've been all compiled into one section. Effectively, what you have before you is a water element. So.
I found it.
And also, on the way of background, I think is also in the report, this has already gone through a pretty hefty review by Dennis Keller, water experts in the county. So See here is a version that is prepared after his review. At his suggestion, or actually I think we all came up with it, if you're looking at page 11.1, over in the left-hand column, that particular area that was added, the second paragraph where it says policy miselement discussing the management of water resources are relative to the areas of water usage that the county has regulatory control. And it goes further. That was put in there mainly to put the water entities at ease that we're not trying to evade their territory, that we're only embarking upon issues that we feel are important enough to start looking at when you deal with projects.
Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
George, this is the first time that we've actually had water in the general plan as an issue. Is that correct?
As a separate chapter, that's right.
And with that said, I have a map, I think it's still in my office, that shows all the tributaries and everything coming down out of the mountain areas through the basins. And it shows all the different entities that have control over there, which is a tremendous number of different entities, water districts, fish and wildlife, fish and game, all those kind of things. Is there anything in here that is contradictory in contrast to what the authority those folks have? Just to give you an example, fish and game, or fish and wildlife. Don't they deal with water as well? Am I making an assumption, isn't there?
From the standpoint of water as habitat, yes.
Yeah. So is, with taking each one of these, is there anything in here that would be in contrast or in competition? Maybe I'm not using the proper term.
Well, I know what you're getting at, and to tell you the truth, I can't give you a answer for sure.
Yeah.
We're still, these have not been reviewed yet by those agencies. I will tell you that a great deal of what's in here is already in the existing county's general plan. There's also some stuff that's new. Once we get into the adoption process, agencies who have an interest in water will need to concentrate on this chapter and make it easy for them to find it, too, because it's all in one place.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could raise a real quick question. George, and what you were saying there, and I see this stuff about groundwater export, is it stepping into a hornet's nest to talk about surface water export? And this issue came out some time back when Mr. Maples brought up the Lower Tule was being sold to a development group on below Millerton Lake in Fresno County.
I don't think that's so much of an issue as long as you recognize that the county has only limited authority. I think we have more authority on groundwater. That's why you see some policies on groundwater export out of the county.
Is there a way of putting in language somewhere that would indicate in relation to the CEO's comments that the county would have an opportunity to review or be informed that this was occurring? I don't know
Just for you.
where to put it, that we may not have any authority, but if we could review it and be made aware of it. We have bottled waters up in my area. Camp Nelson has a bottled watering. Bear Creek is.
I knew Bear Creek would come in.
I was trying to remember the name of it. It was coming to me. But
Not early.
I've pondered Bear Creek many times. But I wasn't thinking so much of the permitting process as I was, we never could really determine on Bear Creek who had the rights and who didn't have the rights to the water, et cetera, because it was on private property crossing federal monument land being sold to Alpol or someplace down in that area. And we had an assemblywoman involved in it as well. But my point, getting away from that personal thing, is that it seems to me that water is such a big issue that somewhere along the line, the least we can do is to address the concern that we be made aware of and an opportunity to review. And I wouldn't have any idea where to put it.
If I can, Mr. Chair, I had a question. That was one of the things I had questions on back in the implementation, where the staff shall develop an ordinance that will regulate the extraction and exportation of groundwater from Tulare County. I don't see where there's any limits to that. I wonder if we should discuss limits.
Which one are you looking at, Phil?
Page 11.7, the first implementation matter. For me, the meats in these implementation matters, this is where the tires hit the road for me. This is what we're committing ourselves to. And I don't think we ever discussed setting limitations on, and we don't, and it doesn't discuss, is this bottled water, is this farming water, what kind of water are we talking about?
And that's the kind of detail you would want to be sure you cover when you, again, I think what the consultants have recommended here are just some general issues that would have to be covered. We include that in there too, if you feel appropriate.
If it'll come back with the ordinance, and how long until we see the ordinance? We've got the timetable 07
according to this timetable, yeah,
10.
by 2010.
Are we exporting groundwater now?
Yes, we are.
Where? I mean,
You're asking about bottled water? Yes, we are.
other than bottled water, so we're exporting bottled
Well,
water.
there is some in Corcoran, right?
Corcoran takes it, and so does Orange Cove.
It's transported, surface water, groundwaters are transported?
Corcoran has a well out. in
Corcoran has
Montana.
wells in Tulare County, so does Orange Cove.
One last question here, Mr. Chairman. I should never use the word last. There is reference to protection of groundwater, groundwater management plans, things of that nature, development of groundwater banking in WR 3.1. Is there comparable language about protecting those soil types that are conducive for recharge so that you don't pave over sand lenses that can be effective in recharging groundwater?
Is that in here, or is it in?
And Worthley talks about that all.
I think there is something in here on that.
In the transportation section, I think, George, I just read through it again, where you're supposed to direct roads and asphalt paving away from recharge areas.
Okay,
It's
I
the
know that's in there
transportation
somewhere.
area.
Can't tell you for sure where.
Thanks, George.
Looking at the 11.3, page 11.3, the 1.1, that first liner says the county shall manage the groundwater resources in the county through ordinances, project approvals, and agreements to ensure an adequate, safe, and economically viable groundwater supply for existing and future development of the county. I know we have that paragraph that first off says we're only talking about that over which we have control. My concern is that the way this is written, some people will take that out of context and they'll say that we have now taken upon ourselves the responsibility of managing groundwater in the county. And that's not something that we want to undertake.
Well,
And also, we'll run into some real problems with the irrigation and conservation districts who see that as their role and not the county's role. And I'm not.
And that's exactly what Dennis Keller told us. I don't see him here, but that's exactly what he said.
But
Could we insert, Steve, after resources, again, under our jurisdiction or within our authority, or you shall manage the underground resources within our authority?
well, maybe it would be the word, kind of going back to what you're talking about, Jim, maybe this would be the place to put the county will cooperate with those agencies responsible
Yeah,
for,
I'll do it.
something like that. Because in that way we're trying to get ourselves involved in the loop of knowledge, but we don't, and that's where the word
the
cooperate
authoritative,
comes in, but
yeah.
not the term manage, because that's not our responsibility, nor do I think do we want to undertake it.
Something about the county shall cooperate with water agencies in the management of.
Yes,
This written, to me, is assuming authority.
yeah, yeah.
Steve, point's well taken.
You know, the question that was asked about roads, Jim, it's also an implementation matter, number 8 and 13.
813.
8 and 13. If you look on page 11.9 and 11.10, It's also discussed in there, but it's also on the transportation side, so implementation matters number 8 and 13 discuss, your question about not paving over those recharge areas. It just really kind of irks me that we're exporting water out. The other cities and other counties have got wells drilled in our county, and they're pumping water out of our county, and we're not benefiting from that. They're just sucking water out of our county.
I think and I think we try to handle it through the language that's used there, because it says the county shall strive for a no net loss where there may be water exchanges serving a public purpose allowed, but these agreements shall not result in the net loss of water from the county. And I don't want to be too picky here, because this is sort of generic, but it raises the question of what do you mean by no net county loss? Because in a typical water exchange, one year I may lose, next year I may gain, and it's not necessarily on an annual basis. But in the overall scheme of things, the purpose, the hope would be that you have a no net loss. And I guess maybe that's okay, because this is not supposed to be specific like that.
I think that's good to have that in there as somewhat an overall goal, but again, it's one of those things that you work out in the details of an agreement.
Question on page 1112.
But before we go on there, this 1.4, which talks about transport, water should not be transported great distances from areas capable of sustaining agricultural growth to areas where ag capabilities are already strained or overburdened with poor soil. I don't know why we have that in there. I mean, to me, it's an economic argument or decision. Somebody would make it for a valid reason. I mean, and they wouldn't be doing it just to be doing it. Why are we bringing it up, I guess? Alan, do you think of anything?
I agree with you. When you say transport water, that's transporting water down a canal also. And we have properties on the west side of Tulare County that are being irrigated from Kuya water. So that's a great distance. So I'd rather just leave it out.
Yeah, I don't know why we need to put that in there.
Again, this is one of the carryover policies from the existing environmental resources management.
Oh, okay. It's gone. I mean, I can't see a justification for it, I guess. And the reason I say that, too, is that if you were to use this 20 years ago, you'd say, well, then you wouldn't send any water to Traver. And now Traver is some of our most beneficial, some of our most productive ag property because of changing, abilities to farm and so forth and reclaim that land. So, what may have made sense then, it would make no sense now, but you could look back at this policy and say, well, you shouldn't be going right by all these other good lands to transport water over there, and that's an economic decision.
Yeah, and I think with the new dairies that we're getting on the west side of the county, which will improve the soil quality, productivity, that a lot of that ground that you wouldn't send water to, you may be motivated to send water to.
Yeah. So I don't see a reason for having it in there.
Yeah, and again, from the standpoint of the county not having direct involvement in these activities, I think the reason this might have been done in 1972 is it wasn't sure then what the county's role might be. Looking to puts down some concepts of if we were involved in this, let's not waste money doing that kind of projects when other projects may be more beneficial.
Do we need to look at 1.9? Again, this is the management question. County shall take an active role in the management of the groundwater resources. An active role in cooperating again, or something like that. So
yeah. Rather than a passive role, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I think Jim's point's right. I mean, I think it's important for us to know about these things, even if we don't control them. But, to know that water is being transported out of the area because that's what another agency has decided to do could have other, ramifications for us from a land use standpoint and so forth and so on. But
Okay. Can we go back? 11.3, bottom one. 1.54, I think that has a huge impact upon a proposed development in Tulare County.
Yeah, I like that too, but I think the key thing I saw there was that the water remaining for ag sufficient to maintain the land is an economically viable ag land use. I think that may take care of the problem, doesn't it? Because in general, if you have irrigated croplands and you convert them to single-family dwellings, you usually you're not really losing anything. It's about the same. So
Let me draw the picture.
okay.
We have a proposed development in the foothills that does not use irrigated land, water for irrigation, and that water is surface water rights that is currently being used to irrigate crops maybe in another county, but they're used for agricultural purposes.
It was brought to our attention that we don't have anything on the board. Are we able to put this on the screen, what we're talking about, so the public has an idea of what we're talking about? Otherwise, it means nothing to them.
I'm doing that. You want my CD?
Okay, so you have water in a creek.
You have another CD?
No, but do you want this one?
Jason, we have a CD right here of this.
Oh, that's right, the board has their CDs.
I see what you're saying.
We should have saved it on your hard drive.
Supervisor Ishida, on 1.5, would it help if it was clarified that the water would be used for agricultural purposes in Tulare County?
No, it doesn't clarify it. Some of this water is not being used in Tulare County.
Well,
What I want to clarify is the fact, if you take your surface water rights, and you decide and you own those water rights, and you decide to use those for a non-agricultural use, that you would not be penalized or prevented from doing that.
Well, it doesn't apply to the same piece of property. It only applies to transfers. So that was the first thing, when we started viewing this policy, we thought that usually would have done that. Again, it doesn't necessarily prohibit it, it just says the county shall discourage.
Well, that's enough to where would give cause that we're not following our general plan. If we can make that distinct, that we're talking about water.
I think from the standpoint, you don't evade the issue, because the issue will be there for the type of building you're talking about, because that's an environmental impact. And the neighboring county will have to be, these tells you that this is not the preference if we can avoid it. Sometimes they're not, it's simply not unavoidable.
and you do have the statement in here which has been added, or conversion to less water-intensive crops, so I guess you could plant safflower or go to dryland farming, dry wheat farming, something like that, so you could, where you would actually have no applied water and rely upon rainfall. So that would be a way of dealing with it.
I'll look at it closer. This isn't final, so we're just.
Okay. Okay, moving along, or something, anything else? I'm wondering if we looked at this from the idea, I know, so we picked up some of that stuff from the old days when we had our own air board, and we still had a bunch of kind of residual things that we got rid of in the last analysis on air quality. Water quality is somewhat like that too, in terms of the Water Quality Control Board, in terms of their responsibility and authority, in many ways superseding the county. Do we have any old residual sort of things here that have been taken out of our hands, so to speak, and given to the Regional Water Quality Control Board?
I think we've cleaned some of that up already.
I'm just asking because I didn't know whether, I'm not as familiar with the rules of the Water Quality Control Board, so I didn't
Regional
know.
Water Quality Control Board, and Brian can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was in existence when this plan was done, when the 72 plan was done. Those regional boards go back a ways.
Well, even if they were in existence, what they did then versus what they do now, and many times they don't look
Well,
the same.
yeah, you probably have a point there. They change over time.
Any comments then about water quality? Going to water supply? WR 3.3, adequate water availability. I know we have a state statute now which applies to, I believe, the 200 housing.
It's 500,000 square feet of commercial development, but my understanding, there's also a clause in there that says that if you're going to add 10% additional connections to a system, you have to do the water supply analysis for 20-year drought. It's under SB 610 and 220.
The statement here is rather generic and broad. It just says, review new development proposals. There's no limits or restrictions in that regard.
And this is already being done. This is new stuff, even though it's a new policy.
Bill, do you want to bring me in?
Only other question I had is on page 1112. I have two quick ones. On the implementation, number 18, how restrictive is that? It says we're going to maintain our landscaping. I mean, how restrictive is our current landscaping policy? I mean, are we like Arizona where you can only plant cactus and rocks?
Well, these xeriscape ordinances were required by state law about, I want to say, 10 or 15 years ago. So we put together an ordinance, and it only applies if you have, I don't recall offhand what the threshold is, but it has to be, you have to have an awful lot of area under lawn before the ordinance really kicks in. The idea being, particularly in a
So it's something we're already
water-deficient
doing.
area, you don't want to be watering these large expenses of lawn for landscaping purposes.
So we're already doing it even though it says it's a new policy.
It's a new policy, we're already doing it. The way it's originally worded, as you'll see, the county shall develop, well, we already have one, so we changed that to maintain. It's just a
Okay.
commitment to keep it going.
Well, I'm going to follow up with something that you would know. I thought you would have brought up, and that's 3.7, and that says the county shall develop an emergency water conservation plan to identify appropriate conservation policies. Is this something, and it says this is a new policy, is this something that we're mandated to do by the state? And if not, why are we trying to undertake this? I mean, it sounds like this could be a major undertaking.
Well, a lot of the cities have already done this, and it just seems to me that at least with, if for nothing else than just our own systems, and it does have a few of its own systems, that
Well, I guess my thought is that when we make this our own, we're saying the county shall develop, and that's helpful, because obviously you would plug in the state, the various cities, but we have a lot of unincorporated cities, and that obviously would not be included in that, so.
if it's a public utility district or a community services district, again, they would have the obligation to do the same thing, but you can't force them to do this. This would only be applicable to your own systems.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about that word going against, instead of saying will develop, we say we will cooperate in the development of, or something of that nature, so we're not binding ourselves to something. It seems like here, when we say we will develop it, we're saying to ourselves, that's a job, go out tomorrow and start doing this. And I think in our general plan, do we want to be that specific, unless we're actually unless we think it's a very high priority and we're willing to put resources to it. See, Bill, this is your area, you should take it.
Well, that's what this next one is.
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
No, it's like it. It's not that one, but it's like that one.
Okay. But I mean, I think Phil, I think Phil, has brought up a good point. As we look at these, when we look at situations where we say the county shall, fill in the blank, we need to look long and hard at that, because why are we doing that? If we're mandated to do it, fine. If we've already done it, fine. But if it's something that's a brand-new program and it's going to cost money and effort to do, we need to be careful about obligating ourselves to do that.
Well, I think the idea here was that this would only be a requirement for your own systems, that you would have to coordinate and cooperate with the systems that are not within your control, such as those operated by special districts. We could change that.
I think that's helpful. If you say that the county has to its own systems, something of that nature, then that's fine. Because that, to me, sounds like we're talking about some county-wide plan that would be extensive.
The other one I had is the county shall. It's the one on page 1114, where we're committing ourselves to a feasibility study of establishing development or design standards on the protection of groundwater recharge areas. Is this something we're required to do? That's the one I caught, Steve.
No, I think this is just a study to determine if it's feasible to do something like this. The way the consultants had written it up, it said that we were going to go ahead and do this through an overlay zone method, and I think there are other ways of doing it besides overlay zone.
Well, this says we're going to fund a feasibility study.
So you're not required to do that by any state law that I'm aware of. This is simply an implementation measure for policy 3.10, I guess.
Are we working on, Teresa, are we working on a list? Remember last time I said, let's have a list of the county shalls and all the studies and the committees and the programs that we're committing ourselves to?
And I think
We did receive that in draft yesterday or today and haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
It's a small book.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff there.
Because this would be another situation where you instead of saying, that the county shall, you could say the county shall consider conducting a feasibility,
And that's, and that'd be fine, too. I'm just saying that, and I guess in summary, I think the board's done a pretty good job of identifying, I think, the two big-ticket items in here, and that's the groundwater control transport issues. And this is the other thing, is this critical water supply areas. That's the other big ticket item that you need to be aware of. This is a commitment to start looking and identifying these areas for protection.
Okay.
So, and how you want to go about doing that, we've suggested here, start out at least with a feasibility study to see which way to go.
Well, I know that in the case of the Alta Irrigation District, that they have already conducted such a study, within their district, and I don't know how many other irrigation districts have done the same thing, but it wouldn't surprise me if they haven't all done that, because they're all looking at water banking as becoming a very critical part of the future water delivery systems, and before you can do that, you got to figure out where the heck you can actually get water to infiltrate the ground. So, but that's a very worthwhile thing, because then when we do our zoning, we can try to identify those areas and try to protect them.
Right.
Goes back to my very first question of how much authority do we have on some of these areas when you have lower Tule irrigation and you have the one you're speaking of. In fact, they go through to protect themselves. So I don't know how we could do much more than what they do.
Well, this is where we have great control, because we're talking about land use then. Because, for instance, in Dinuba's case, they found that they had a wonderful recharge place that was right in their industrial park. And had it not been brought to the attention of its usability for this other purpose, it could have easily been built over and been a giant, building, warehouse, and concrete, and lost completely.
Lost it, yeah.
So once it was discovered, then they took action, because it was in the best interest of the city and the irrigation district to utilize that. But we do the same thing with like gravel. We identify areas where there's gravel that has potential commercial availability, and then we zone accordingly to try to protect that resource, so it isn't built over and subsequently lost forever. So this is an area where we do have considerable authority still.
I'd like to follow up on what Supervisor Cox and Worthy have been saying on this shell. All of us sitting up here understand kind of what we're trying to accomplish. 10 years from today, when you get a whole 50%, 25% more population who do not understand what we're talking about, because they come from urban areas, we can't take things for granted that they're going to be interpreted the same way we interpret them today. So I want us to be very careful on these shalls and committing us to action that we know on a practical basis we're not doing. I think someone can make us come back and do them because this is the Bible. So I want us all to be conscious of whatever we may understand amongst ourselves is not the same as what someone from Los Angeles that moves up here was going to look at this book. And
how about Oakland? Somebody from Oakland.
Well, and the real risk, I think, is that someone comes in and they say, well, you can't issue the building permit because you're out of compliance with your general plan, because your general plan says you're going to do this and this and this and this and this, and you haven't done any of that. So
That's why we didn't want to say specifically what we're going to do. That's why on this one, we left it to a feasibility study.
And that was my large concern, is that they would challenge our decision based on the general plan being flawed. We might make a land use decision, and they could find something in the water resources section and say, you got a mistake here, your whole plan's flawed, you got to throw the project out and start from scratch, which is a possibility.
I think that's our concern. I could ask a question. I'm on page 1113, looking at number 21, where it says the county shall protect groundwater recharge by carefully regulating the type of development within these areas. I mean, is this something we don't do now?
Again, I'm not sure we know specifically which areas are to be protected for groundwater recharge.
No, we don't
That's
do
what we
this.
talked about over on the next page, this feasibility study.
How do we do this if we put this in there?
That's where the idea where you do the feasibility. And again, like I say, I believe the work's already been done for us.
It has?
And some,
in many cases, it has been.
some irrigation districts, I think,
Oh, by the irrigation district.
Yeah, or conservation, because they're all looking at water banking as being a critical part of how you handle water in the future. So in order to water bank, you got to know where you can do it. And so a lot of them have already done that.
And those studies on both sides, those people all agree on the same?
Well, they're technical studies. I mean, what do you have? What kind of soil do you have? What's its depth? Does water have the ability to perch? Is it a perched water table like we heard about today, or does it have the ability to get down where it does some good? Is it on this side of the? Is it on the east side?
I'm not disagreeing with
Is it on the east side of the Corcoran Plain?
I just want to make sure, because I heard a lot of conflicting testimony this morning.
Heard a lot of conflicting opinions this morning. I don't know. Yeah, okay. All right. Anything else? Water?
Moving on.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I can interrupt you for a moment. I know that Supervisor Conway was going to leave at 2:30. Would you like to go ahead and have that other closed session before she leaves, or do you want to wait on it?
Oh, are we ready to
We can do the other closed session now if you want.
Okay, let's do that real quick. We have the information that allows us to do that?
I believe we will.
Okay, let's just take us about 5 minutes and we'll be right back.
Will you get my CD back? When this is over? When it's over. Or whenever.
Chapter
7, I think. Let me just check and make sure. There it is.
I don't know, maybe Aaron Prosser, while we're in closed session, can burn a copy real quick.
In here somewhere.
no more dairies on those water recharge areas.
Is this a document that's?
After today, it will be.
With the board's blessing.
Take some minutes, and I'm not doing a very good job.
Eric Prosser's at a meeting, so he won't be able to.
I just copied it onto the desktop.
Excellent.
I'll just delete it.
There you go.
Jason.
That's it. That's why you're the IT guy.
Yes. It's all right. Thank you. I didn't, I
Extra
downloaded
copy
it.
of this Harry Tao,
Your project list, I'm
one
just
of our
listening to it.
consultants.
Oh, okay. You know what, I keep it on my junk drawer.
Oh, well, then that would
It's
be
in my,
very-
in my
your briefcase?
briefcase, that zipper on the flap. Yeah, it's on a lanyard.
If I don't find it, I'll just take the drugs.
Well, the reason that I
I'll
like
take the ammunition records. I'm still trying to determine water.
The Yoko Valley, working as a consultant.
Well, that's why Alan was asking that one question about that one policy.
That's what I thought it was, yeah.
Yeah, we did change it, so we feel like it's, you know, it's not, the issue's not gonna go away.
Well, I know it's not, but he was interested in protecting, make sure it wasn't just only agriculture, so we can say.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys are gonna do? You have any,
Well, no, the way the thing reads is,
that's some kind of antenna on it.
yeah, yeah. See, you heard that too. Well, we've got the same concern. That's this one right here, the bottom of 11.3. Yeah, take a look at it, see what you think. Clearly, the yokel people want to look at that. They may have comment. I'm sure they'll have comments too. I'm sure they'll provide it. I'm sure they'll provide something in writing. Yeah, right there. No, it starts here. Don't know yet. Don't know yet. I think we'll start with it this way, and get comments on it, and if we want to make changes along the line, we will. Sure, sure.
enjoy the read.
Put it on
Nothing
your-
in there on
put it-
dairies,
Roger,
though.
Roger, put it on your pillow tonight, right?
I carried 5 volumes of the EIR this morning, and I don't want to.
Yeah. Oh, Roger Wilson. Well, he looks like Harry Tao, but Harry Tao's 20 years older. I think Harry's got to be at least 80. Yeah, Harry was one of the founders of Quad. Now, he's no longer, he and Z founded Quad. Neither one of them are that active anymore, although Harry still is. A lot more than Randy. I think Randy's pretty well retired. Oh, I know. They really did it up right.
They too want to come and set an office up in this area. They're a transportation engineering firm.
Okay.
Going to talk to Bill about the RFQ. I also met the EDA project manager for that Mojave Desert project at the form-based code workshop, and that is so fascinating. I think it's the biggest development project ever.
You said you said you had they were going to take you out for a tour.
Oh, I want to get a tour, yeah. Yeah, there's only 90,000 cows that they're building for, but they're building cheese plant, milk plant, and the milk basically is going to come right out of the cow's udder and right into the jug. Rail lines, all of the holding areas. They figure they'll process 30,000 cows on an annual basis. Then the Korean technology that they're going to pioneer there and in Traver. And just, really interesting project.
This Korean technology really works.
It's a miracle technology.
Anything that sounds too good to be true usually isn't, but we'll see.
Well, they're putting their own money up, though, $700,000 in Traver. So, they're willing to take the risk. Then that's still a 900,000 match needed, 1.6 million for the project. The other form-based thing was really, really good. Have you ever heard Andres Duane speak?
Nope.
He's extremely motivational, and we were just all abuzz. We had 10-hour days for the first 2 days. The third was only regular 8 hours, which is a little tough when you're in Vegas, but it was riveting.
leave you any time to get to the crap table for crying out loud.
You know, I made $60. My hotel was across from the Hard Rock Cafe, and I took I took my cab driver's advice, and I was out there, have my dinner, get a free glass of wine later in the casino by spending $20 in the slots. The advice was, when you win money, you quit. $60. I quit, and I could have used that $60 and tried to make more, but I bet I would have lost it. So I was really proud of that, because I got free groceries this week. It was really interesting. We never stopped talking about planning the whole time we were out with, I was hanging with a planner from Sebastopol, and then this fellow from EDA who lives in Pasadena, and their urban problems are the antipode of the issues here in Tulare County. They both, well, Sebastopol is predominantly very rich liberal.
Yeah, right.
And they nitpick things, the public nitpicks everything to death, and they
Isn't that Marin
do.
County? Isn't that Marin County?
I think it's the county north of Marin, whatever that one is.
Sonoma.
Yes, it's in Sonoma County. And so they require things like
These
gray water recycling systems. You must put solar on your units. You must do xeriscaping. It's kind of the opposite. They're like, this is too restrictive. Well, they require it. They will not allow the use of pesticides and fertilizers and, you know, you name it. It was so, and design, my God, they want to design the doorknob on the door.
Well,
So nothing moves that way in planning.
that's right. It's all planning by inches, and
But
it just takes forever to get them done.
everybody's really rich and happy there. And they all wear hemp and have tattoos on their bodies and things like that, you know. They're like Australians. They don't show off that they're really rich. So that was fun. I guess Pasadena, my God, the average house is $2.4 million in Pasadena, I'm told. This fellow that, he was really extremely intelligent. He used to be a band manager for KISS. Well, hey, I had fun, George. A lot of inspiration, and then we're all just effusing, you know, all of this planning dialogue, and it was what I needed. I needed to get some rapport with others who love the same thing. And learned a lot too about the applications, which is potential but limited. We could never do a whole county in form-based, but it has, for specific projects, it is a good alternative for specific projects. But to actually do the synoptic surveys and the calibration and all of the public participation, things like visual assessments and things that help to get the product that people want, it's extremely intensive. So, but I'll spell out everything that I learned there in a kind of a brief summary so that we can look at that. But in combination, one thing, a lot of what they do is they give it as an optional zone, where if the county wanted to do a pilot on something like that, we would do it and then give developers within that pilot area the option of using the form-based code. That's mainly how it's being used at this point. There's not really too
For
many.
large projects. Well, maybe you want to rewrite that 160-acre policy. Rather than specific plans, give them the option for form-based codes.
Done what? No, we're just hanging out.
Wait for them to come out to closed session. Yeah. Connie has to leave at 10 or 2:30, so they want to get that done. No, something else. I'm not sure what it was. Maybe that's the idea on that 160-acre rule. I'll make a note in that.
I was thinking about how we could use it, and maybe what we can just recommend that it be available as an option, which actually I wrote it into the Goshen contract that, you know, if anybody wants to pilot, we need to find somebody who's going to be willing to partner with us to pilot it. so we can see what kind of, like for downtown streetscapes. Do any design. We just take their modules.
First time.
Lewis is the one that had it,
You didn't have enough this morning?
Crawford.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's back.
Yeah.
Just can't get enough of it.
And basically, a lot of the other
Oh, I see.
cycles they
Ah,
call them,
okay,
the longer swinging, are
Some of it.
the product.
Yeah.
And they
Okay, so what are we on to next? Are we on to
What time do you leave,
infrastructure?
Steve? What time you have to leave, Steve?
I need to leave by 4.
Mr. Chair, if I could interrupt again, if I could just go ahead and announce there'll be no reporting out from the closed sessions. So that's done.
I don't think you did.
I did.
What's next, Teresa?
Element 7, scenic landscapes, please.
And can you give us a page number on it, where to find that?
It's 7-1, it starts.
On 7.
Must be short, because I can't. Okay. Got it.
Am I correct, Teresa? This is the only chapter that was written originally by Bruce Race?
Where he started the whole process, there we go.
So it's a little different format than the rest of them, but they're trying to make them all consistent.
This is the chapter where you're seeing attention paid to the aesthetics in the county, to the tourist economy, but also to the communities in the county. There are sections in here on the natural and the working landscapes, scenic corridors and places, community design, and a little bit on infrastructure. And there's also 2 maps in here that are really kind of framework maps. One of them has the state scenic highways and county scenic roads, and those are highways that are eligible for designation. But also in the existing general plan, we do have a listing of county scenic roads. Now, this map also is not comprehensive of everything that we have in the general plan currently, and we need to reevaluate this. We were wanting to put that into the county's GIS system, as well as the second map, which shows the urban separator concept. And urban separators are proposed along basically corridors so that the travel experience, the aesthetics of the travel experience can be protected. And that, in summary, is what you have in here, and we're happy to hear comments.
I actually like the last implementation matter. That's a very good one. It's on page 7-10.
I'm surprised Mr. Maples didn't jump on that.
One of the shells. That's a shell.
And that ordinance is being prepared as we sit here.
Is there any place to include the terminology of monument
Could do that.
in description of what we're doing? We have gateway to the Sequoia. I know that the communities, a lot of them are using the word gateway to the monument or some other terminology related.
Are you referring to the Sequoia National Monument?
I don't know, I'm just asking. I don't have a strong feeling, but I've heard it used. Some of the people that are talking about recreation, this kind of thing.
Going to Phil's process, which is sort of cutting to the quick here, on item 3, the county shall prepare design guidelines for county scenic roads and state scenic highways. That's a new implementation. Got a lot of work to do.
Excuse me.
We will be back to the board here shortly, probably in November? Yeah, with a report on the scenic highway program.
No, that's a state highway system, though, right?
That was just
But
the Rivers, though, wasn't it?
But that's,
That's state.
but that's state, but this is talking about county also. I
We
mean, so
already have it, we already have it in the Foothill Growth Management Plan.
Oh, we do have it, okay, okay.
Don't have it for the valley floor, though, but for the foothills we do.
I mean, really, I don't know how you just, I was just looking at the map, how you distinguish Dry Creek Road from Boyd's Grade. I mean, they're all scenic, they're all very similar. I mean, they're little roads that go up in the foothills, and they're very pretty, you know. But I don't know how you would say one is superior to another, and this one is in, and this one's out, because
Well, you know, I think that over time, this can be an opportunity for the county to showcase some of its little byways as a part of a tourist program.
my only thought was, you know, it's like driving down in the valley floor. There are areas in my mind that are more attractive than others, and that, like, if you take the road by the Red Barn, you know, goes up towards Wood Lake, and you're going over by where the large nursery is, Monrovia, and where the county Charter Oak is. I mean, those are very scenic over there. But it, you know, I mean, for someone who, if you talk to somebody who comes from Southern California and they drive down looking at cotton rows, or they're looking at farm property, to them it's extremely scenic because it's unusual to them, and we go by it every day and don't even think twice about it.
They'd stop and ask if they're lost.
Well, I checked to see how high the cotton is.
Yeah. Anyway, I just raised the point, I mean, because so are we proposing that we would do one for the valley floor too? I see we say we have something for the foothills, so we look at the valley floor as well.
The map on page 7-4 does identify county scenic roads on the valley floor. What we have currently in the general plan is predominantly the foothills and the mountains.
How were these identified? I see these dotted, you know, county local roads. I see, gosh, maybe 100 miles of them. I mean, who designated those as scenic?
For the valley floor, I'm not actually certain about that. But as I say, what I'd like to do is to redo this map to show those that are currently in the general plan. Most of those mountain roads, having driven them within the last several months, you know, they are highly scenic. But I want to compare what we have. There's several places in the current general plan where there are different lists and maps that show different roads. So to put them all together and look at why they were chosen.
It almost looks to me like these are our major arterial roads, our farm to market roads type thing. And look in the valley floor.
That's one.
Yes, they are.
Who made them scenic?
Well, I mean, does it raise enough of a question that we want to, I mean, what are we going to do with it? I mean, right now, we've got it in our plan and saying these are proposed.
Well, I think it's like the scenic quarter that we're working on at Three Rivers. That is being initiated by local residents. Now, if we want to do a Blossom Trail or some type of deal like that, I could see that be a county initiated by the county, or
by somebody.
Or the loop up in Jim's District 5, you know, on the east side. If we want to do a foothill scenic drive or whatever, but that's got to be initiated.
You go from about 200 feet to 7,000 feet in 9 miles. And if you stop to look at the scenic view, it'll never be seen again. And so I'm not too sure what you do with a road like that, except it takes your breath away. You think you're in an airplane looking back out over the valley. But that's
Question I have is, and I have to admit, I've not read through this entire section, how does this limit, I'm sure in some way this is going to limit tall buildings or obstructions of that
Cell towers.
nature. Well, cell towers those are only this big around. Those aren't too bad, but I'm thinking here on some of our scenic, you know, we're calling them scenic corridors, but also in our general plan, we're identifying these major intersections across freeways and things of this nature for commercial development. Are those conflicting? If we have a major overcrossing over 99 and it just happens to be another one of these scenic corridors, is that going to prevent us as a Board of Supervisors from approving a large regional retail project because it's going to obstruct your view for miles?
That becomes part of the plan when you put the plan together. But
Usually it's part of the plan. Typically, using the foothill standards as an example, what you have is a little bit greater setbacks in the road, a little greater separation between structures, but development is not prohibited.
I wonder, instead of saying proposed scenic state highways and counties, if we would just maybe want to say these are,
Candidate?
huh?
Candidate?
Candidates or something of that nature, because, I mean, this sounds like we're saying we're going to propose these, or someone's going to propose them. And I would say these are just sort of examples of, because
That
when I look at
could
this,
be.
when I look at this Valley floor, you could move those lines 1 mile either direction, north, south, east, west, and what would be the difference? It wouldn't be any different normally. I mean, they look the same.
Unless they went through a dairy.
The eyes of the beauty of the beholders. Okay. Anything else then?
I keep waiting for you to get over to 4.6, but
I do, I will say one thing, and it's kind of hit on your billboards. It is a much more scenic drive through Tulare County than it is through Fresno County, primarily because of the absence of billboards. And once they're there, they're hard to get down, but if they're prevented from getting there, you protect the.
And that's because most of 99 and 65, the zoning prohibits billboards.
Yeah. Yeah. So there again, that's another way for us to control these things. Okay. All right. Anything else?
But just as a question on 4.6, dealing with cell and communication towers, the agenda item that came to us last week, would that study be brought forth to be included into this area? It seemed to me we spent a great deal of time and discussion and what have you with that. We did the emergency item on certain conditions, but wouldn't the study that is being prepared by Resource Management now, wouldn't that be assumed that it would be incorporated into
Supervisor,
area dealing with cell towers and communication?
are you looking at page 13-7?
7.7.
7-10.
Yeah, I noticed under communication systems on 13.7, there was reference to siting of telecommunications infrastructure.
That's covered twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm kind of chuckling because construction of sound walls and so forth, it's ongoing as we speak. That's nice for the people who live next to them, but when you're used to driving down 99 and driving through Early Martin and seeing the town, you no longer see the town. You start seeing walls.
Well, of course, Tipton was the big example because you used to be able to see the town.
Yeah.
But on one side, you can still see it on the downtown side.
Okay. What else do you want to head for? Last thing?
The last thing is area plans, and I will have to tell the board that this was the last piece to the puzzle, so to speak, that we got to see. And so we didn't get a chance to review that before we gave it to you. That's why yesterday late you should have gotten the revised section that shows some changes that we're recommending in the plan. And so still with me here, we could go through those changes with you.
This Valley area policies, that the...
This is the area policies,
Yeah,
number
okay.
14.
All right. You should
And we
have
also
that.
gave you a one-page memo sort of highlighting some of the changes.
Mr. Chairman, did we skip over Chapter 13? Are we going to come back to that?
Which is 13.
The public facilities and services?
Did we go through that before?
We did go through that, yes.
Okay.
We've gone through that already.
I was just, when I looked at 1311, items 2 and 3, you can just throw in on the area of responsibility to throw in the CIO's office because we're in the middle of doing a study on impact fees. And for public facilities is one of the impact fees being considered. 13-11, items 2 and 3.
2 and 3?
Yeah,
Okay. CAO?
right. We'll be bringing a proposal to the board.
Okay. Good.
Thanks.
When?
Excuse me?
When?
I just said soon, and he shook his head and said yes.
Well, I said when.
What is soon?
Yes.
Soon and very soon.
Some other changes, I'll just go into the memo quickly, just to highlight some things. And I think the first item there on urban boundaries, we've had some discussions at the staff level. The consultant had originally thought that go ahead and make changes to these urban boundaries for existing communities, not hamlets, no, those are all new. But he was operating under the assumption we could go ahead and make those changes now. And after reviewing the policies, and in particular, you would want to look at 2.3, PF 2.3, it just seems to us that would be in conflict with what our existing general plan calls for. You already have an urban development boundary. You don't change that boundary unless you're doing an update to your community plan or you're adopting a new community plan. And we're not doing that here. Community plans are not part of this general plan update.
Wait, 2.3 is scenic corridor plans?
This is PF 2.3, and I didn't get a page number on that, but it's over in the, let's see,
It's up towards the front.
that's up in the front in the framework chapter.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In the book?
And I had a general question, George. I'm wondering, because I look at 2.313, the West Goshen Hamlet development boundary. I was thinking that was, you don't have to flip back to it, Teresa. You go, oh, no. I'm wondering how updated are these? Because I looked at the city of Isaiah's urban boundary development lines and Tulare, and I'm wondering how updated those are, because these don't look like the ones I have hanging on my wall.
You're looking at the maps that the cities have adopted, they wouldn't be the same.
Well, right, I'm asking, shouldn't we take theirs and plug them into ours so that they're consistent?
Again, the same policies apply until we adopt their general plans, their latest version of their general plans. We wouldn't want to change the boundaries because they're still based on our plans.
So even though they've adopted and changed them already.
That's right.
And approved by LAFCO.
Probably not approved by LAFCO. That process was starting later this year.
Okay. Because I looked at them and they didn't look the same. And as I looked at the Goshen, the West Goshen Hamlet, I was thinking that got gobbled up by the new Goshen urban boundary.
It got gobbled up.
Well, I'm wondering why you have a separate one in here.
It got gobbled up into the study area. It's not been decided yet if that's going to be the boundary.
Okay. So it's got to stay in here because it's not done yet.
Where we are right now, we're proposing that as a hamlet. But anyway, the references back on page 2-7, PF 2.2, gives you the criteria for modification of urban development boundaries. And so what we are proposing as a part of this presentation is that, and what gets actually sent out is the maps that say proposed urban development boundaries for these unincorporated communities would instead just indicate that those are to be considered in the future. Because you need to have community plans to do that. Because if you didn't do it, then you'd have a situation where your plan doesn't match your land.
Again, that's not referring to Hamlets, that's referring to.
Hamlets is different because we can make that change now, because we have never done, these are all brand new. The other major thing that we wanted to make clear to the board is, and you'll see it, you'll see this missing, the RVLP policies got left out. So we want to make sure that's all in there in their entirety.
And is that being updated, George, in terms, because, I mean, it had the original dollar amounts and so forth. I mean, it seems to me like that needs to be adjusted for inflation and so forth. I mean, those amounts per acre values.
In terms of what, that's the definition of prime land. This is RVLP, which is different.
Okay.
We don't use the dollar amount when determining prime land. It's used we use the Old Soil Conservation Service land classification system, class 1 and 2 land.
I thought there was a part of it that we talked about capable of, I mean, maybe you're right, maybe it was.
Not RVLP.
Okay, not for RVLP.
Short.
But that got inadvertently left out. I want to make it clear that we're putting that all back in. And also, Kings River policies and implementation measures somehow got into this. We've taken that out. We feel like the Kings River sub-area plan, along with all the other sub-area plans and community plans, they're in another chapter somewhere. We're not going to touch those with this general plan update, so we didn't want to confuse the issue by leaving Kings River. We'll also make a comment that we're working with the consultants to structure the general plan into 3 main sections or articles. The first section will be what you're reviewing now, the overall goals and policies, the 13 chapters. Chapter 14, then we're going to take that and put into another article. That'll just be the 4 area plans. That will be the valley area, which is mainly the Rural Valley Lands Plan, the new corridor chapter, the Field Growth Manager Plan, and then the Mountain Framework Plan. So you have a body of policies in the first 13 chapters that is roughly county-wide, and then specific planning policies that apply to the 4 main regions of the county: the valley, the corridors, the foothills, and the mountains. And then the final chapter, which of course is what you're not looking at in this update, is the community plans in the area, sub-area. Hopefully we'll get that clear to our consultants, because I have a hard time trying to explain this to them. So hopefully next time around we'll have that taken care of. Anyway, we have gone through the area plans. You have a revised version. If you want to go through that, we're happy to do that with you.
All right. On page 14-9, this is on the handout we have here, George. AP 2.4. Could we add retail, or I'm sorry, regional retail commercial?
We are in the corridor plans, right?
No, 14-9, the handout we have.
Yes.
The top left-hand paragraph says regional growth corridor plans. I wonder if we could add a regional retail commercial. And if you don't think so, tell me why.
That's fine.
I think that's the next thing we're going to be looking at real soon. And if we don't have it in here, it might be difficult.
Under AP 3.9, the handout, under B, what is the history behind the major tenant of the complex and the grocery store? Had to be
When are you on, Jim?
sorry, on the handout, it's AP 3.9, commercial development.
Mm-hmm.
And then under B, small b, the major tenant of a complex shall be a grocery store. It's on page
Yeah, I see that.
14-10.
Okay.
I'm wondering, it's just a question, how do you determine that it should be why do we determine that it should be a grocery store?
Not a hardware store.
Not a hardware store. I don't know. This is existing. It's an existing policy out of the Foothil Growth Management Plan.
Yeah. Wait,
It says
my question, I'm sorry.
It just says land uses that provide neighborhood-related services, and that's i.e. local markets, video rental, et cetera.
My big question mark was on C, that limits it to 5 acres. I think that's too small.
Okay.
If you look at any shopping center going on in Visalia, that like this Winco thing out here, the new grocery store out there, that's got to be on 40 acres.
But now, this is all under the Foothill Growth Management Plan we're talking about, right?
This is FGMP only, yes.
So, I mean, that's a little different, because you're not talking about
Well,
large.
it's not got.
You may be looking at a larger complex in Springville. When
Well, I
if
think
they
5
ever get
acres is
those
still too
homes,
small.
Than a 5 acre parcel.
Everything changes.
Yeah,
5 acres then.
Yeah, your 5 acres, I think, is just too
5
small.
acre maximum might be small.
Might say minimum size of 5 acres.
Okay.
Maximum size is too small.
So it should be like 10 acres, you think, or something?
Maximum size. It requires probably a special use permit and everything anyway.
My understanding of reading the Foothill Growth Management Plan is that the reason for restricting the growth anywhere in the development corridors was so that it would go into Springville and Three Rivers to support those growth in those
I
communities.
think that was the idea here, is,
Well, I mean, as you
Okay,
drive
put
through
them in
Three
the
Rivers,
UBDs.
yes.
That's
as you
what we're
drive through,
directing to do.
as you drive through Three Rivers, that commercial, the new, I'll call it new, it's not new, but the new commercial development on either side of 198, those are larger than 5 acres, where the grocery stores and all the donut shop and the restaurant, those things
I
are.
think what they're saying is that it's specifically written this way to force those type developments into Springville and Three Rivers, into an urban development boundary, or a community development boundary. So you just can't do it at Lake Success or Lake Kauai. I want to build a 10-acre retail commercial center.
How does 190 and the Indian Tule River Tribal Council building a new construction, didn't they agree to the Foothill, to
The lands and trust.
the Foothill management?
Yep, they did.
So certainly it's going to be larger than a 5-acre parcel, I would guess.
Well, again, this is, although the title of that policy talks about, says commercial development, it's really only neighborhood commercial that these standards apply to. And if you look at the other policy, 3.10, that's commercial recreation, that's probably more in line with what the tribe is doing.
On AP 3.12, on page 4-10, the light industrial use, we have a zoning matrix, George, that actually identifies what light industrial uses are. In our zoning matrix, you've got light industrial use, and it tells you these are the allowable uses, A through Z or whatever. And
Yeah,
these are the ones with the
not
special
laid-
use permit or.
It's not laid out in a matrix, actually, but we do have a list of uses.
So that's clearly defined somewhere. If you want to find out what light industrial uses are for this, you can look at a list.
There is a list, not only in the M1 zone, but in the implementation policies for the Foothill Growth Management Plan, there's also another list,
And they're all subject to a special use permit.
all subject to a special use permit.
Is it possible to have any areas identified where you don't have to have a special use permit if you have a, and I'm
Once again,
not
you'll-
familiar
you'll
with that foothill area. You know, I don't know if you want to open up that can of worms, but have any areas been identified where it's allowable to create these types of uses without special use permits?
Inside Springville and Three Rivers, that's not a requirement.
I wonder on mobile homes, 3.11, encourage mobile home projects to locate and be designed in a manner that is compatible with existing developments patterns and does not detract from visual amenities. One of the things that when you look at the modern mobile home, manufactured housing, it can be a very attractive structure. It can look like it was built on site, and it can be very attractive. But what detracts visually is something that's older. You know, an old 1968 mobile home moved up on a piece of property that has, you look right out as you're driving along. Huh?
You've been in my neighborhood?
I'm wondering, is there a way of addressing that? Because I think part of the people's concerns about mobile homes is the latter description is what they think of, because that's what they see oftentimes. And I don't know, maybe I'm talking about something which is not a problem. Maybe newer development, we don't see this happening anyway, but is there a way of addressing that? I mean, is there...
In the foothill zones, as well as any residential zone right now, the rule in the county is if the mobile home, or actually they're called manufactured homes, if they're being installed on a foundation system, then we don't treat them any differently than a conventional residence. And the same thing applies in the foothill zones as well. This is really talking about
Mobile home parks. Yeah. I know mobile home parks, and the way they often sort of deal with that is they don't allow beyond a certain vintage. So mobile homes got to be a certain age to be allowed in there. If it's older than that, they're not going to allow it in the park. But,
And as you probably have surmised, these mobile homes are not very mobile once they get set down in one of these.
Well, we use the term too, trailer house. What people think of.
and that's the problem, because like I say, when you look at the modern manufactured home, it bears very little resemblance to that. I won't say it, trailer trash.
But that's what they're moving out in the foot where I live. It's those ones that you're talking about.
Those older ones that
the
are.
older ones.
Okay. Well, and that's, again, this is really a project, which is not, not talking about individual residences. Maybe that goes to our issue about scenic corridors and so forth. Anything else as we move through this? The one thing I wanted to ask about on Badger, we have a section here on Badger, 3.26 through 2.8. And I just know that the old Synanon property, there's a project going forward there at this time. Is there any problem with what they're proposing and what we have here in terms of use?
That probably fits into the category of a recreation commercial type of. This only talks about parcel size for the most part.
It actually, they're looking actually at residential development, but it's an existing site that was designed for Synanon, and they're looking at taking advantage of all of the infrastructure that's there and the pads and so forth, and then putting in a high-end, like we were talking about, prefab type of
I
home.
understood it was to be a timeshare type of setup or something like that.
They're looking for some type of ownership, perhaps, or something, too?
Well, it could have been changed. I haven't spoken to them for a while.
Well, that's big enough too, where it could fit in with one resident per 5 acres if you had
No, they're smaller.
1,000 I mean, if you got 1,000 acres, you would divide the.
No, it's not like that. It's actually a the pads were all in place.
Right.
There were 800 people living there at one time. They're proposing a much scaled down type of a proposal, but.
The policy that would probably kick in would be 3.27, would be the density. Because you're talking about 1 unit per 5 acres. But the property, if it's the same piece I'm thinking of, is a rather large piece of property.
It's a rather large piece of property, but it's kind of, they sort of have the pads and so forth, they're all kind of,
It's
like a
clustered
community, it's
all-
like a clustered development
It's
type thing.
clustered in one area, but the overall density, I think, probably.
And that's acceptable under this, what you're saying. As long as you have it's sort of like animal confinement requirements.
Something like that.
You gotta have so many acres per animal unit.
That's what I was trying to bring. If you have 1,000 acres and you still allowed so many people, or so many residences.
Do we need to make any reference here someplace, thinking about Mr. Ishida's position with regard to the Conservancy, Sierra Nevada Conservancy?
It's not a bad idea.
I mean, they're going to be a player. I don't know how we interaction with them, and make sure certainly we want to.
Yeah, well, their territory starts at the Blue Oak growth line, wherever that is, because it varies from mile to mile. Now, let's talk about how we put them involved. I think Brian just got a letter from them the other day.
Well, and as I recall, even their constitution, if you will, the enabling legislation talks about the county's role and so forth. We probably should be incorporating that at least into the plan so that we have it in our plan.
Okay. In the foothill part of this and the RVLP part of this is pretty much all existing. The new parts are the corridors. Didn't want to hand this out. I wanted to discuss it or defend it yet today. There was one. Let's see. Over on page 14.-9 or AP-6. There's indication that we're the policy to be added, regional growth corridor opportunity areas. We've put together the first draft of what we think might fit in there. And it basically is a sort of a transitional policy. The plan envisions that ultimately we would have regional corridor plans prepared. But until you have such a plan, what do you do? This would provide an opportunity for projects to proceed. It's this one right here. For projects to proceed until the plan is developed, if it meets the criteria. So what it is basically a candidate area that for possible zone changes. It would be an area within 1/4 of a mile of the right-of-way of State Route 99 or 65. That would be approved for highway-oriented commercial, industrial, or mixed-use development if the following criteria are met. It'd have to be relatively poor soils. It would have to get a rural lands plan evaluation of restricted agriculture. That's not the same as 17 points or more. This means it has to either be in an ag preserve or can't be developed because of a very high water table without a sewage disposal system. Property must not have been used for commercial agriculture for 5 years, and the property must have either direct access to a publicly maintained road or be located within 1/8 mile of an access to the state highways. These are all drafted. We just cut this out this morning, so I appreciate any input that you might have on that. That would be the idea, is until you have these regional corridor plans, you at least allow development to proceed if it meets these criteria.
I'm wondering if it's too restrictive.
For me, this is pretty restrictive because, you know, the calls I'm sure you're seeing now, and you're having people visit you on, George, are, you know, these major overcrossings across the freeways on the, you know, the four corners where there's possibility for development there. This would pretty much say it's not going to happen.
Again, this is the first cut.
It looks very restrictive to me.
It's modeled after a very similar provision in the Kings River Plan that was also very restrictive. So I'm open to some suggestions to that you might have if you don't see it as workable.
George, how about fruit growers on Highway 65 South, if you're familiar with that? Remember, we had a lot of opposition to that whenever the board approved allowing them to put it in. Downtown merchants and others, but in the meantime, Home Depot came in and closed them out anyway. But anyway, the fruit growers is on Highway 65 South. It's in an agricultural area. It does provide a certain percentage of agricultural sales, which qualified them for prime agricultural land, without question. Would that have restricted them? Because
we were able to show in that particular case that food growers was an ag-related use, so it went into the zone, didn't require a zone change. And I suppose that's the other option too, is that most of these corridor areas outside of urban boundaries are zoned agriculture. You could still put ag-related uses in there. This would be for non-ag-related uses. Somebody wants to put in a service station or a hotel complex, or what we really need, of course, is some good truck stop facilities. Something of that nature, then these policies would kick in.
Well, if you were to put up a map and try to pinpoint areas that fit this criteria, you might have 3 pins on the entire map up and down the county. So I think it's really restricted.
Okay, well, that's the kind of input I was looking for.
Well, and I guess my thought was, we're talking about an interim type of a plan. This is not long-term. But I guess I would be concerned, too, if a person was in an existing situation and they want to expand. You know, I mean, it's one thing, if we're talking about going in for where it's brand new and it's right now it's planted in citrus and you're talking about ripping out 20 acres of citrus and doing the development. But if a guy's already got a business there and he needs to expand in that existing location, that might want to be one of the exceptions, I would.
Yeah.
I think my major concern would be, I don't mind fruit grower supply sitting there on a stoplight or Terabella or Ducor development, but I hate to see any commercial retail on all the intersections coming off of these highways
Without some controls.
Of course, fruit growers went in before the stoplight did that.
But their example was because of the ag-related. We have another one was up in Orange Cove.
I agree with that.
But we don't want to see highway commercial on every intersection.
In between the lights.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, and maybe if we leave these restrictions that are here and then allow the expansion of existing locations, would that take care of the problem?
Well, I don't know. You're saying this ag-related commercial. I'm talking about regional retail commercial that wants to locate in at these major crossings, and it wouldn't be all 4 of them, or every one of them, but there's, if you look at, I'll pick an example that this board had before years ago, 198 and 99. You have the the northwest corner there. It meets, probably meets most of these, but if you move down to Caldwell, none of those corners meet this.
Let me clarify where I mean. I'm specifically speaking of Highway 65.
We just have 99 in.
I didn't mean to bring 99 into it, Phil.
Well, because this says 99 and 65.
Right. But I think they're separate, and they have separate characteristics. Like 198 and 99 is totally different than anything we're going to find on 65.
Yeah, because I thought this board's intention was to allow commercial development on some of these major overcrossings and intersections, which this would prohibit.
Okay, we can loosen these up a little bit then.
Well, and again, this is just interim, so I mean, long-term, I agree with what Phil's saying. I think interim it's less of an issue, because the only thing that was striking me right now, I could be wrong though, like that's the place you're referring to, but that would take a general plan amendment. But that's part of the planning area of Goshen, as I recall now, too.
That's part of the Goshen study.
There, so
Well, I'm thinking more of Caldwell than I am of Goshen right now.
Okay.
Okay. But we're sort of on the right track. That's what I wanted.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Should we go through
I didn't
this?
have any other question marks written down anyway.
I'm brain dead, so I'll have to look at it all in one.
It's not my brain that hurts.
That hurts too.
And I was going to mention too, these mountain area policies, these relate back to some work that was done. Some of you might remember Josie Chapin. She was with our office for, 20 years or more. Just to put this together, but we got diverted to other things and we're never able to bring this to the board. So see there is a largely work that she had done.
Just looking at the last one there, talking about privately owned forest lands.
I thought you'd find that one.
Protect and maintain the county's privately owned forest lands by encouraging the state to implement or existing policies or adopt new policies which accomplish the following: provide new and innovative incentives, encourage good management practices of timberland retention, encourage continued reforestation. The fact of the matter is that we don't have much privately owned timberlands, and the biggest risk to them at the current time is probably public ownership. I think about the last large giant sequoia grove that was in privately held lands, and that's now part of the national park. And they continually acquire in-holdings on the national forests, so that we don't have much private timberlands, which begs the question. I mean, I've thought before we ought to have a kind of a policy that we says we don't, no net loss of private ownership land in Tulare County, because we keep losing, and we even saw some of that this morning, dealing with issues on dairy permits. I mean, as public ownership land brings with it lots of interesting unintended consequences. One of which, of course, is the loss of tax base and future development.
I thought those guys down in Due Course had a big piece of land up there in the forest.
What's that?
I thought the timber company down there in Jim's, I thought they still had a big.
No.
You still have private holdings in Pex Canyon.
I mean, just in my short time frame, I know, Case Mountain, is now BLM property. That was privately owned. You can look at the old Forest Service maps. There used to be all these white spots inside the national forest. Those are privately owned properties. And you take a new map and compare them with one 20 years ago, and there's a whole lot less of that white space in there.
Well, I think when Brian and I were in Washington, the Forest Service people were complaining that the United States government keeps buying this land, and the Forest Service really doesn't want to take more land in because they're having a hard time managing what they have.
And that's happening not only at the federal but at the state level. I mean, you acquire more property, but you don't have the resources to manage it properly, so then it becomes marijuana plantations or a place where you have problems with weed, noxious weeds and different things like that. So, I mean, I do think that's something, I don't know how the rest of the board members think, but I think that would be a good policy for us to have. And I think it kind of goes along with the idea that now that we've got the Conservancy, it's another whole animal to devour more private land, that I think we ought to have a policy that strives to maintain the current private ownership percentages of Tulare County.
And that's not necessarily just restricted to the mountains. That's a countywide.
Countywide. Does anybody else have any problems with that? Anybody?
No.
George, I think we're through.
Anything else in here?
Get the names.
I'll reread it.
You know, I mentioned the maps, George. We have on page 5-18, since you asked the question, I think I have 3. Under LU 4-2, big box development. I think that needs to be more specific, where it just says the county shall limit the size of big box retail businesses on a case-by-case basis to be consistent with the character of the area. I can drive a tractor through that.
We were trying to leave it loose.
You know, on page 8-16, implementation 13. Again, we're committing ourselves here. It says county shall protect oak trees throughout the foothill mountain areas. Preservation methods may include agreements with the owner, conservation easements, and purchase of the property by the county.
Oh.
What did I just say about public ownership?
Yeah, I just, all the others okay, just strike out purchase of the property by the county. I don't think that needs to be an option.
That came out of the old Army, so what can I say?
Here's the last one I have. Do we have a historic site preservation committee now in existence?
No, we do not.
That's on our list, right, Teresa?
One of our lists of
That's on our list of things to do, committees to
form.
form, and
That reminded me, there was one area I'm trying to think it had to do with historical, it said we would consult with the Tulare County Circle Society, and I was going to say we should, I don't remember which one that was now, but we've covered it this morning. We should add, and other local historical societies, because all the communities have, most of them have historical societies as well, just to.
that was identifying
Historic sites?
historic sites throughout the county.
Okay.
That was one of the implementation matters. Since you asked.
Public, there's some folks here that may want to address us on matters. Don't feel obligated, but if you want to come up.
Like all staff, except for this gentleman.
And he's a fill-in.
He was still here. He just said, I gotta go home.
Speaking for Mr. Tao, anything you'd like to add?
I was asked to come to the meeting. We were concerned with the Yoko Valley and how that development may occur. We're working with the developers there. So watching some of the policies you may be implementing, how they impact that proposed development.
And that's thoughts crossed our minds up here too as we've looked at things. I think that's been.
It's even one of the issues regarding the use of water, restricting the only fair use, possibly affecting.
Right. Okay. Mr. Hash?
I just want to thank you for what you say. In the last 5 Tuesdays you held, it was the greatest help to us, really, for you to take time to review it. Thanks to George and Teresa for doing it. I think the process improved much. I know we made Mr. Cox pretty busy every night with reading, and all of you, so I want to thank you for that.
Welcome and thank you. I think we're moving along, and
There is one additional
Teresa?
request.
Yes.
And that is to authorize staff to move forward with public review of the document and set public hearings to complete the update.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, please cast your votes. Vote was unanimous, absent one.
Thank you.
I think Brandon with a great
Yep.
I think last week or the week before last, I met with the Farm Bureau. George and I met with the Farm Bureau about having buffer zones around agricultural areas. And I think the conclusion that we came to was that the Farm Bureau is going to write something up, but we're looking at possibly, well, everything is up for grabs, but putting these buffer zone regulations in effect with properties which are outside of UBDs or urban growth boundaries of even the hamlets. If you draw your growth boundary, and if this property is sitting on the outside of that line, they're going to want a buffer zone. In essence, what that buffer zone does, it really prevents you from developing that property if you're outside of that line, because you'll have a setback.
I just, all I want to say about something like that is I really think we need to consider all of the consequences to that, because I'm concerned, and I think it might be useful to think of it in terms as, like we've talked about today, not hard and fast rules, but guideline type things. For instance, you have a lot of natural buffers that occur from roads, canals, things that create buffers in and of themselves. I'm concerned about the fact, too, that we have a history in this county of farming up to the limits of the cities, the community. I mean, it's always been that way. We've always done it that way. I'm reluctant to give it up because I'm concerned about what happens in that buffer zone. Does it become a dumping ground? Does it become, how is it maintained? Who's going to maintain it? What are we creating? You know, and so I think we need to be very, very cautious. The concept sounds good. We're going to separate people from farming enterprises, and so therefore we don't have to worry about oversprays. We don't have to worry about all kinds of things. But I do think we need to be very careful about unintended consequences.
No, but the consequence is simple, is that the buffer zone is not the farmer's buffer zone. It's the developer's buffer zone.
Exactly. And so the developer develops his property, he sells his property, he leaves, and now what happens to the buffer zone? What is it? Is it a dumping ground? Is it undeveloped property? Do the weeds grow there? Is somebody going to maintain it?
You have to maintain a landscape lighting district in order to maintain.
I just think we have to be very, very careful about what we're trying to do. I understand what we're trying to do, but I think we need to be very, very careful about unintended consequences.
All those issues have been discussed. I've been to a couple of these meetings now with the Farm Bureau, and everybody is in developers. Unfortunately, I don't think we had BIA at that meeting, the last meeting, but they have been involved as well. All these issues have been discussed at length. And
because as I say, there are.
Jump that line.
If you did a landscape lighting district, you could maintain it, and you just have to be able to police it.
type of the width of the buffer zone the Farm Bureau is pushing would, if you didn't do it on the edges, you wouldn't leave much. If you just did it for every project as you move out, you'd end up with more than half the property taken up in the buffer zones.
Yeah, see, I just think that's why I think it has to be very, very carefully thought out, and I think the farming community needs to be very, very careful, because they are in some respects complicit in the situation we have now, because everybody who lives next to the city is potential city property themselves, and so I just think we ought to be very, very careful. Like I say, I've grown up in the country, I've lived in the country all my life, and I've been around sprays and everything else, and I see repopulating of the interesting thing going on right now in my district is I see the countryside being repopulated with housing in the agricultural sectors. And when you talk about buffers, it's their own buffers. People buy a 20-acre parcel and they build a house on it, and they buffer themselves from their other people by their farm properties. So I don't quite understand this fear of farming that seems to permeate this whole process. Because as I look at it, we spray with less intensive sprays, less you know, the sprays that we use today are not nearly as strong and powerful as ones we used to use in the past, and yet we're acting as if what we're doing is atomic warfare or something. So we got to have these separations. And I don't quite understand
I'll
that.
draw you a picture afterwards.
The policy.
Well, you not only have the builder and the farmer, you have the city versus city. How much money did we spend as a county doing a study between Tulare and Visalia on Mooney Grove? And was it the county?
Actually, we most of that was paid for by the Great Valley Center, bless their heart.
Yeah, but it was money spent, you know, and look what happened. As soon as the city started to grow, it went by the wayside.
Tracy started to say something too. Yeah.
Sorry, Teresa, if I cut you off. Is that what you're indicating?
I thought you started to say something.
I gave way.
Oh.
The draft policy that we included in the agricultural element says that we will explore the feasibility of using such lands, as you mentioned, that 30% typical infrastructure portion, road rights-of-way and canal banks and that sort of thing. But it's just to explore the feasibility of implementing buffers.
And see, and a lot of it can be done, I think, can be from a design standpoint. I mean, you could create buffers through designs without, that's why I'm saying there's different ways to skin the cat here. And I want to be very, very careful about making some hard and fast rules. And it's like drawing circles, say nothing within this diameter. Pretty soon you start putting those circles all over a map, and you can't do anything except for little pieces here and there. And that's not the intent, that's not the intent, but that's what happens.
I'm getting kind of punchy because I only know one way to skin a cat.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order?
Adios.
If not, thank you all.
Okay.
Sorry.
I bet Julia finished.
They try to say on the one hand that it's safe.
Okay, I have to close this down. Okay, I'm trying to find, I'm trying to find a 1991 ordinance.
Boundary.
On house numbering, like December 3rd,
they want a little
1999.
more.
And I'm not finding it. I can't get into it.
Oh, I think that Lynn got that. Is that the?
She got the agenda item, there wasn't any ordinance attached.
There's setbacks.
It could almost become like an inverse condemnation deal where you tell a person, you have to give up your
No,
development.
no, what it does, it stops
Because I
it.
can't remember.
Exactly.
What it does, it stops going
I
outside the
thought Jim
boundaries.
Maples was the chair of the historic committee.